I can hear.
I just wanted to say that I don't think that equating Gnosticism with violence, it's a fair idea. It's fair. I think it's anachronistic. Because if we take like a case study like the Cathars, an extremely pacifist religion, what that has to say about violence in Gnosticism? They didn't eat meat, for example, because that will make the demiurge happy, which is evil. Inside the Gnostic philosophy. I just want to say that the nature of living as a human and as a living being is violence. Violence is part of nature, because I have to kill an animal to eat it. That is, violence does not come from seeking gnosis or seeking greater and greater heights in technology. It comes from either hate or a need to survive.
Okay, let me respond very briefly to this, because you're not entirely wrong at all. In one sense, it's Adam and Eve in the garden who are first gifted by God with garments of skin. And so the first animal sacrifice comes from God. The difference, however, is to see our middle nature. And so when we see in Genesis our garments of skin, what we're seeing is our middle nature. Our first nature before ancestral sin, before the fall, didn't have such violence. And our future nature in the eschaton will not have such violence. Our middle nature does have such violence. And yet this violence has to be used carefully. That's why fasting is so important. Fasting is the temperance of violence on a very unique level. It's violence of our own stomachs. It's contesting our own passions. And at the same time, if you uphold technology as such, techne qua techne, then inevitably what you're upholding is power qua power. And so you're using violence not in any sense of an animal sacrifice, which is to lift up prayers unto heaven, but instead you're taking that violence and you're using it just against mankind, which leads to the Tower of Babel, which leads to the cleansing of the flood. And so the violence of a secular identity is what these philosophers are seeing, and that's where they're saying Gnosticism in its modern sense is perpetual chaos within the world. The world does not align. The world is perpetually at odds. Techne just furthers that to a higher degree.
I have the impression that we are the victims of Heidegger. If we connect Aristotle, we have Bradshaw, Professor Bradshaw here, East and West. We have two nice stories. Professor Vlatakis said that seeking necessity and seeking statistical correlation is something different. From a formal point of view, this is fundamentally wrong, because statistical correlation is done for dynamic, nonlinear systems. It's correlation. We are seeking patterns. We are trying to find necessities. The Church Fathers used the theory of categories of Aristotle through the summary of Porphyrius in order to describe Christian dogmatics. I don't see any problem to see all these models an extension of the infinite mystery of energies, as St. Palamas would say, into examining the limits of our knowledge. Because if we know Gödel's theorem, every formal system has its own limitations. All these fears arise from people who think that scientists are something like semi-gods who believe that they know everything. This is not correct. This is the journalistic approach to science. If there is something good for science in the 20th century, is the humility of knowledge. We learn that we have limits. So let's not misrepresent serious scientists by philosophers who think that modern science is a form of bad Gnosticism. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the statement. I think it's
Professor Vlatakis.
for Professor Vlatakis. Okay.
Το μόνο που θα ήθελα εγώ να σχολιάσω είναι, καταρχάς εγώ συμφωνώ.
The only thing I would like to comment on is the fact that, first of all, I agree. With what was said.
Έχω να πω, ναι.
Yesterday I taught the theorem of incompleteness of Gödel. I wanted to say something which is the epilogue of my thought. We find ourselves at a time when there is truly this journalistic transmission of information. We people identify simply with whatever it is that saves us in the solitude of our atheism. There's nothing that I know that it exists. What feeds me, what gives me water, what cures me is important for me. If I can come to a state where I lose nothing, then so be it, and this is what I want. This is what I believe. I couldn't care less, and I wouldn't bother to go beyond that. And of course, I wouldn't examine the humility of certain scientists, but I, for one, have grown to love science because of its humility. From the example that I gave when I talked about causality, what we need to understand is that, for example, of course, writing something worth a Nobel is not linked to eating chocolate. The true correlation is that there are people who are well off, they're wealthy, they have satisfied their other earthly needs, and having covered this, they have the luxury of time to use their talent and to express themselves and write a book or something which is worth a Nobel. We discover a pattern and we tend to stick to it. And the second thing that I showed is the following. Artificial intelligence can discover infinite patterns that satisfy a working assumption, a specific one. We cannot identify ourselves with a model and say, oh, this is the model that I see before me and that's it. No, because the computer itself, during the learning process, may achieve exceptional levels in faults and errors, but at the same time it may have generated 50 different models, none of which are true. So it boils down to the personal humility of people and the pureness of the knowledge to know that, you know something, a model can go as far as this. From that point onwards, it is my doctrinal belief that enables me to say, I believe this. This has nothing whatsoever to do with modern scientific functions, humble functions, ready to refute anything wrong the second after it has been said. That about covers it.